Hey guys, how's it going? And welcome back to the Windsor Time podcast. I am Noah, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Ben. And then today we have the treat of having another guest, Mr. Nate Cho. How's it going, buddy?
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's jump into it. Nate, out of our friend group and the Carolina Watch Club, has, I think, one of the most interesting collections because you are super into the micro brand space, right? Mm-hmm. So let's just start at the beginning. How did you get into watches, and then when did the micro brand, fascination kind of start?
Sure. I think from a schooling, training background, I'm an engineer, so I've always liked mechanical things. I got into cars as well, and we do see a huge overlap in those two hobbies as well.
Sure, for sure.
But so when I got my first job, I started to get a little bit more disposable money. I was able to buy my first watch. It was IWC Portuguese, 3714,
nice.
like
That's
the
awesome.
Chronograph.
And was that like the first watch? Was there like a childhood watch before that or anything that kind of sparked an interest?
You know, the childhood watches, like a lot of them were more digital, I would say. So
like your Casios.
The Casio, the calculator watch. And then I did have a older Link, that was a quartz,
nice.
That I enjoyed because you could just beat it on everything and it would keep ticking,
not
right?
Think about it
not
too
to worry
hard.
about it too much. But I do remember, like, even with that piece, learning about certain things like the screw down crown. Like, that was the first watch I had with that. So it was always I always forgot about that. I'm like,
nice.
Why won't this come out?
Yeah.
But on the IWC only perpetuated that fascination with watches. But into the micro brand and independent space, it was fast forward a couple of years, probably about 6-7 years ago. Mm-hmm. A couple other these brands started popping up, doing a lot more. I think the access to tools for them were much more available. But the two that come to mind for me are Ming. So I picked up their first piece, the 1701, cool. And just the design was very cool. How it played with light, and then the second one was the Oak and Oscar. There was their. I know they had the Burnham first, but it was the Samford that really stuck out for me. And it's the tiny details. The 7 that had the hyphen through it, that's how I write my 7s as well.
Is that an engineering thing?
Yeah, maybe. There was no graph rule paper or anything else. Yeah. But those design elements were the ones that kind of interested me and got me very excited about these other watches that were there. And the other thing that kind of stuck with me was actually borrowing a little bit from the car area was when I got one of my first, I would say, nicer cars. It was a 2004 Volkswagen R32. And part of the reason I got that was, yes, I could have got, I guess the equivalent would have been the Mark I TTRS or TT. But you didn't want to show your boss. So it was the same idea. So with the watches.
Those bosses, man.
I know. So I think what was nice about the micro brand and then independent space is to allow for an opportunity to
outshow them in a quiet way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Only if they know.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and that, I have a GTI as well. And like when I was looking at my GTI, I was also looking at some of the equivalent Audis. And it just, like you said, I had a BMW before, but like, you get so much out of those cars. Yeah. Like you said, and a perfect correlation back to the micro world. It's something that most people don't know what it is unless you know. Yeah. And that's really the beauty, I think, of your collection. What always brings me back to that.
I appreciate that.
It's kind of like, I'm not going to use the same phrase we used in a previous, edition of this with the hobby, but it's almost like getting back to what watch collecting used to be like. What I would imagine was like literally decades ago, where if you know, but also some things you didn't see unless you just physically saw it on someone's wrist. It wasn't something that was on a blog. It wasn't something that was in a, this ad. It was, at a level that's really a craft thing. I'm curious with Ming, and I should know this, but when they first launched that first piece, did they do what they're doing now, where they do kind of a timed release and it was kind of first come, first serve, or was it really more bootstrapping where like you just kind of reached out and if you could get it? You remember what that was like when you did that purchase?
It was a timed, or when I think of timed releases, there's that new format now they try to do where within, if you ordered within this time, they would try to fulfill it. But they ran out. They had limited numbers, but starting at X time they had that. But I appreciate what they've been trying to do with experimenting with different formats to make it more accessible for other people to try and get. And then they also try to break up their batches into for people who've bought previously, and then for new owners to try and bring
satiate the collectors, but also grow the brand and find someone new. And cool. Yeah, because you can't just always go to collectors, or it just stays in the same little circles.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah. There you go. Nice.
But I think that one other thing that's interesting, going back to your original question on microbrands, is a lot of times we also talk about microbrands and independence, and it's interesting because those definitions are also very hard to define, because we talk about certain brands, Oris, Christopher Ward, and you wonder, like, where do they fall in that spectrum? Some of them start to have a lot of money. I mean, arguably, I guess Rolex is independent.
Yeah,
right?
Good point.
So, it's just an interesting discussion.
Yeah, I could say I even conflate that verbiage in my own mind too. Like, even before this episode, I was kind of using those two words in the same way, and they're very different. Independent and microbrand. Totally different animals.
Well, and I mean, even to take it a step further, Patek is technically an independent, but a micro brand. And it's interesting, like you talked about Oris and Christopher Ward. I remember when I got into watches, I had a loaner watch to shoot for Christopher Ward. It was the C60 Trident or something. So like their diver kind of watch. And I remember, I think it was $1,200 at the time or something. And like, it was an interesting correlation of going, okay, this isn't a big name brand, but it was a quality product that even then I realized, oh, there's something interesting about this space. So I'd imagine the same thing for you, once you have, and like you said, you had the IWC, you kind of satiated that area of collecting. You were looking for the next thing. And I think that's what's so awesome about the watch collecting hobby. Yeah,
for sure. And much like why I enjoyed the watch collecting hobby like we talked about the Carolina Watch Club, I know in your previous episode about them, it's about the people. And so what I really enjoyed about a lot of these independents and micro brands is getting to know the people behind the brands.
Totally, absolutely.
But also getting to enjoy, a lot of times, like I'll use Oak and Oscar, for example, and our friend Bryant here. He's a passionate fanatic about them.
You'll be fine. You'll be fine, Bryant.
Yes. And like, it's exactly that. Other people who are also very passionate about those brands. So when you meet these people who are also owners of Oak and Oscar, for example, like you immediately get a bond, and it's an easy conversation. But then the other example I'll use is, I was in Nashville recently for work. I happened to reach out to Cameron Weiss of Weiss Watches. I have one of his pieces. He used to be in LA, but he moved to Nashville a couple of years ago. And he was just very welcoming, went by the shop, spent far too long there, but he just talked me through all the equipment, and I got to learn so much about what he's working on and what the tools do and why he picks the tools he does.
It's so cool.
Which I don't feel like you have the access to with some of these bigger brands.
Not at all. And I mean, you get a culture that is promoted to you by these brands based on advertisement and or a video or a tour of the facility that's done in a very artistic way, but you don't really get hands on a lot of these brands. I also think about this past year, we had the opportunity to go up to Wind Up and Watch Time events, and how humble was Kari Voutilainen when we just walked up to his little booth, and he's one of the preeminent watchmakers out there, and literally was sitting there just talking to each person independently. Wait a few minutes, get your turn to talk to him. So humble, yet he's one of the
most revered,
unbelievable watchmaker, and you don't necessarily get that, to your point, you're that much access when you're at these heavy branded levels.
And I think it would be remiss if we didn't say, I mean, Max Busser was also there. We got to meet him and
accidentally bumping into him in the line.
What a crazy thing. I mean,
such a nice guy.
Yeah, you're not going to run into some of the bigger guys like that.
Correct.
But he was very cool. I remember, we're nobody. I mean, he talked to me and a couple friends for like 10 minutes about just different watch collecting. He talked to us about our watches. I mean, what a cool space to be in. Same thing with, Monta, Justin. I got to talk to him several times. And I just at one point bought a piece without saying anything. And it was such a cool thing to get and enjoy that watch.
It's
knowing
kind of
him.
it's kind of like the higher ups and the owners and operators and or watchmakers at the independents. It's like they could go to that next level and get even bigger and sell more watches, but they would lose that sense of being a watch guy and being in the throes of being in the culture and being at these events, and you just naturally by growing.
Yeah.
So it's nice to see that some people they toe the line of getting big enough, but not losing their core
and building the community.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and we saw that. I mean, Wind Up. That was my first
Same.
watch fair that I went to, and like, what a cool culture! What a different culture.
Yeah.
I mean, I had my sub on. I almost kind of tucked it a little bit because it was just a little too mainstream for the room. I mean, it was so cool. I think is it Undog?
Yeah, Studio Underdog.
Yeah, I mean, so cool to see those in person.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a really exciting thing to get to see.
To me, it's so amazing in a space or a domain that's been around for so long that these people can be so creative and still create unique DNAs, right? Design DNAs that, like, you could see across the room. It's a Studio Underdog,
Absolutely,
or MBNF.
Yeah, Fears was there. That was
Fears.
cool.
Fears was so cool.
Yeah. What was so? Let's dive into that a little bit. Out of that show, and I think we actually have it. We have it here on the desk. We can talk a little bit about what you brought, but
And what's on the wrist.
I think you collected this at that show, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what we have here.
So this is the Dark Matter, the Fordite, or the Arc 2.
Yeah.
What's interesting about it was, so I was lucky in that I'd reached out to them when they posted this online. It was their number one.
Yeah.
So Fordite, for those that aren't familiar with what the material is effectively overspray paint from old Ford factories in the 70s and 80s. And so because the processes weren't as tight, you got a lot of this overspray, so you got these unique different patterns. Unfortunately, or the tough part is processing a lot of these, because a lot of the paints back then were, they carried lead, whatever else.
Sure.
But the team at Arcana, James and Anders, took a slice of the Fordite, and they would slice them out and would make the dials. So that's what we're seeing it now. So it's very unique. And at least for me, coming to this, the other thing that changed with a lot of the independents is, and maybe some of this is just the fact that we aren't as reliant on wristwatches these days just to tell time.
Sure.
It's more of a luxury. It's a way to express yourself. It's art. If I was to ask myself 7 years ago, would I have bought a watch without a seconds hand? Probably not.
Yeah.
Now, a good chunk of my pieces, I'm
or
willing
any
to have
hour
that.
markers on that.
Exactly. Or no hour
Yeah.
markers, which is interesting.
Not to
And I have
mention a
couple pieces.
really interesting crown functionality, which I'm sure we'll get B-roll of later, but just some really unique aspects of that watch.
Well, and it was fascinating. So I listened to, he was just on Standard Age podcast, Wesley's podcast, shout out Wesley, not that long ago. And he was talking through, so you had the old Ford factories, but now I think he had done some stuff with McLaren, and he was talking about the complexity of the makeup of the paint now is more
water-based.
So it's even increasingly difficult to get those dials. So cool. What is the best value for kids' watches? No, I'm entirely serious. Like, in your opinion, if you're going to get your kid a watch, what is the best value for, call it, under
I'd probably say it's Richard Mille.
Richard Mille.
For sure.
Yeah. Their new sports model they just introduced for ladies. Just get one of those, strap it on.
Perfect.
No problem.
Between my two leading candidates would probably be the About Vintage, because it's super durable.
Yeah.
And then I think it's called Fandango for that one. And then the Block. And what I like about the Block is the bezel isn't a traditional bezel of delineating like the full 60 minutes. It breaks into 5, 10, 15, and 30-minute timers.
Oh, very
so it
cool.
starts to teach them how to track time.
So TV time, iPad time.
Like if I was
stuff.
to say you have 30 minutes, they can set it and they'll know when the 30 minutes
Do they know how to do it?
Yes.
So that's so cool.
They'll use that for tracking time.
Nice.
Do they choose to let me know at the end? Not always. But
there you go.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about what's on your wrist, because you have another really interesting piece that I wanted to jump into.
All right, perfect. So story-wise, if I was to back up, actually one of the last trips I took before the pandemic, I got to, the company I work for is out in Sweden, so I popped down to Helsinki afterwards. And while I was there, I reached out to Stepan Sarpaneva there and to say, hey, can I just come by and chat with you? I happened to have a coworker with me, and who is not into watches, but we traipsed through the rain. We got lost, couldn't find where his facility was, a lot because it was raining, but it was also in an industrial complex.
Yeah.
I believe he's actually moved since then, but finally got there all soaking wet, and he was super welcoming.
That's awesome.
And he spent probably 2.5, 3 hours with us, as talking about how, like, I had a lot of questions, like how he got to where he was, how he started to do this. Like, what I love is the passion for, like, behind all these people, and a little bit is the jealousy to leave a corporate job and go and say, hey, I want to go do this.
Yeah.
Right. So, and so he walked us through a lot of this. He had just launched his lunations piece at that time. So his moon phase, super accurate moon phase. And so it was at that time, I'd always been eyeing him and considering him.
Yeah.
And to be fair, I think at the time, I hadn't really considered spending as much as on some of his other pieces. He does have a cheaper brand, SUF.
I didn't realize that was
Yeah.
Oh, okay, very cool.
SUF Helsinki is him as well. And so, and his intent was, I think, to make some of his stuff more accessible to others.
Yeah.
And so fast forward a little bit, not too much later, I saw the Nocturne come out.
Yeah.
Before that, he had done a couple pieces with Moomin, which was a famous Finnish character, or cartoon character, and that he did a lot of loom. And so the Nocturne was very similar, with an owl, the moon, and it's a moon phase.
Yeah.
It's a Soprat 810, I believe, with a moon phase built on top of it.
So cool.
But just a lot of fun, and so that's what I have on the wrist.
Yeah, so
I
cool.
don't know
Did
if
it come with
impressed
rubber?
you. It did not.
I like
One of the
rubber.
other things that I have also decided is a
Those
cheaper,
new deluxe.
yes,
The cut. Yeah. Okay.
a cheaper way to experiment and not buy new watches is to play with straps.
Yeah.
And so this is
Totally.
the new deluxe cut to size, or CTS.
Yeah.
Um,
I really like that.
yeah.
Yeah. That is awesome. I mean, and I wish we had like a little black light to light it up, but I've seen the loom on this a few times. It's
It's
just
fun.
so
There's a
cool.
lot of
That's
different
so
colors.
Yeah, and that green just goes phenomenally with it.
Love it. The owl is so cool. Is this its original clasp, or is that?
That's actually
That's
the
from the
one that
strap.
comes with lugs. Yeah,
Okay,
so for
cool.
the cut to size.
Or I'm sorry, I meant the clasp. It's that's so
Yeah.
cool.
They do a fun. They did a good job with that.
That's really awesome.
So there's another watch here. I really want to hear your take on, because I don't actually know that much about this brand. Okay. What do we have here?
Yeah, sure. This is from Josh Shapiro. He's out in Los Angeles, and what attracted me to this watch was the dial.
Yeah.
So if you're familiar with like engine turned or like guilloche dials, obviously I don't say it's a lost art, but it's definitely becoming harder to come by.
Sure.
And Josh was I want to say a former high school principal, but he had a background in things very mechanical, and started to pursue this hobby around watchmaking, or at least on the dial side, and started doing a lot of these things. And what was very cool is there's this basket weave pattern, and he invented a new one that he internally calls, or to others, the infinity weave, and is really a basket weave within a basket weave. So in every
so cool
quarter of the basket weave, you have another basket weave. And that's in the subdial here.
Wild.
But beyond that, he's trying to bring a lot of stuff back to the US, which I really appreciate, given how big watchmaking used to be in the US.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting, a lot of his success, or I don't want to tout all of that, but he's had a little bit more access to the equipment, because I guess a lot of that equipment was here in the US.
Yeah. He does wedding bands as well, doesn't he?
He does. He just started doing that.
Very cool. Yeah, I wasn't sure which came
patterns on
first.
it. Yeah.
Okay, very cool.
So again, going back to why I love these independents, I got to go over and visit him in Los Angeles. He showed me his facilities, and he even showed me prototypes of this before it was announced. So it's like kind of cool to see some of that, but just also to see why and how he chooses the equipment he does.
Yeah.
And even here in the club, we have some other people who work with CNC type equipments, and I'll say that now I'm out of my depths. But I tried to propose this company to Josh. He was like, no, that equipment's way too big for us, overkill. Yeah. So it's interesting to hear why people pick the tools they do.
Yeah.
But the other thing that was interesting about this piece is it was a limited run of, I think, either 26 or 29. where it was made in tantalum, which is pretty rare because it's a metal that's really hard to work with. It's super gummy, and so it wears out the tools really fast. And unlike a lot of the other metals, once you go through like your excess is scrap. Like gold, you can take and like melt it down and use it again. Yeah,
interesting.
You can't reuse it. So what's also nice about tantalum is it gives it the heft that you would have traditional precious metal watches.
Is FP Journe, that's the other company that used
Chronometric. They have the Chronometric
Blue. There's a couple brands now, but that's the one that I think put tantalum, I don't want to say on the map because people were using it before, and it's been used in jewelry for some time, but that was the big, you know.
So this one's blue, and I picked it a lot probably because of that. That was the one that stood out. They offered it in black.
I mean, I would argue as much as the mirror like blue gold dial, the Chronometric Blue is unbelievable. I would say that's a much more interesting dial in a lot of ways, not to compare them. I mean, they're different. Is he a one-man band where he's making every single element, or does he have a crew beneath him, or like multiple watchmakers? How
his first series of watches was actually a 40 millimeter case that he sourced. So this was I want to say this is the first case he did in-house. He brought it down to 39. Gotcha. He uses UWD. So if you know Lang & Hain from, it's another, I'd say, independent. Yeah. But Marco Lang from Lang & Hain founded another movement company. So they supplied the movements. But they're stopping doing that. So that's why they stopped this. But what I really like is in the near future, Josh is going to have his own movement in-house.
Very cool.
Unfortunately, it's a little bit of a jump in price, and I'm not sure.
It tends to be the
that's how the trend goes.
But once again, we're all you're in the independent world, and you want to support brands and support this culture, and part of that comes with supporting the business, and creating your own movement costs more money. There's no way around that. You got to tool up. You got to so if you want to live that arc of that brand, you got to be prepared to move along with it. You know?
And this is neat to see that here in the United States, right? There's RGM, Keaton Myrick. There's very little that's done.
There's a lot of things that are cased up here, but to actually be manufactured or made here, or at least completely made here in the future, is an exciting thing.
Yeah.
From a micro brand perspective, how important is it to you as a collector to have an in-house movement as compared to like an ETA or a Sellita? Like, how much gravity do you put behind that whenever you're looking at buying a watch? Because I feel like a lot of brands you see.
I'm surprised we haven't touched on this before.
Yeah, like you see a lot of micro brands have like either a Seiko movement or something like that. I mean, what do you say?
I think you have to buy what you like. At least that's my philosophy. And some of my favorite pieces, so like one I purchased not too long ago, a couple years ago from Lane, is a 6498. So at a Unitas movement.
Sure.
Finished beautifully. Black mirror polished on everything. It's a gorgeous piece, but it is a Unitas movement.
Right.
And then more recently, actually I brought it here. Maybe we might get a picture of it later. Is one from Atelier Wen.
Yeah.
They're two Frenchmen who fell in love with China, decided they want to kind of elevate Chinese watchmaking. Found a guy in China who was willing to do engine turned dials. But I'm not sure about the quality of the movement.
Sure.
Actually, I think that movement manufacturer probably provided some stuff for the super clones and those other stuff we've seen in the market. So they have some expertise with it.
Yeah,
they haven't done their own, right? Like you sometimes can't tell, right?
We do not
endorse any
and so
replica,
they're exiting that market and trying to provide for.
I would say, like a lot of things, if you're innovating to the point where you can either replicate or do something better than some things, and then all of a sudden take that to scale, then it's kind of like, why not? I'm not, putting anything positive behind replica of anything, but why not take that know-how and make it, make your own brand out of it? I mean, it just makes sense. They clearly have the talent.
Correct.
So,
I mean, that, I don't know. I'm sure you've got to see it in person, but that's,
unreal.
Just phenomenal.
Beautiful.
And it does have a bracelet. And again, like where I thought they tried to push the boundaries is their class has the similar style of micro adjust as the Odysseus.
Very cool.
So in a sub $3,000 watch. So you have a engine turned dial. And it's relatively
unique,
9.4
fun case
thick.
shape.
So
cool.
and inspired by, or inspired by Chinese architecture.
Yeah, cool.
So I don't like, and the Archanaut, same with the Archanaut. Archanaut uses the So Proud movement, but I just love the design. And I think you should buy what makes you happy.
I like it.
It's funny, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but when I worked for Breitling, I worked there right when the B01 movement came out, when their in-house chronograph came out. And that was really, they had maybe one or two little in-house things, but that was the original in-house movement. And, the mantra was obviously sell in-house, but people were throwing around the phrase in-house, and that was where it stopped. And, it almost did a disservice to these workhorse movements that are so wonderful, that are so amazing, that many brands have been using for years and years and years, that, at a certain point, in-house is amazing. And, I think there's a reason many of these independents use a workhorse movement, though, because there's price point, there's also reliability, and what's known. There's a lot.
And I love to pass this on to my children.
Yeah.
So serviceability.
Something you can work on. It's been worked on for 4 decades, depending on the movement.
Exactly.
It's not something that's been worked on for 3 years and they're moving on to the next generation of it.
And they can get parts for it.
Exactly.
How do they fix this?
Yeah. That's a good point.
And actually, there's also a certain charm. Like, I go back to that first watch I had, or the first real watch I would say, is that 7750 movement, right? You get the little wobble.
Yeah.
I like it.
For sure.
It has a certain charm.
Awesome. Well, I think we can go ahead and jump into our shop picks for this week. So, Ben, what do you have over there?
I brought something a little different. This is a JLC, Jaeger LeCoultre. I'm going to butcher that because I don't speak French. Ladies Rendezvous in 18 karat rose gold with a diamond bezel. And not quite a guilloche dial, but kind of this interesting striated dial with really big, easy to read, blackened numerals. And it's not a dual time, but it does have this cool, and not a moon phase, but it has this cool day-night indicator. So it has a little sun, like really actually well thought out, and
it's pretty.
It's just a beautiful watch.
Do you know how
Beautiful sun. I want to say that. Oh man, you put me on the spot.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I want to say that's 31, but okay. I'm gonna. It's a lot of dial, so forgive me if that's not JLC. You don't drop me as a retailer. Beautiful sun and moon. So basically an AM PM indicator. You've got a sun during the day. You've got a moon during the night, and it's just a really cool art piece because the level of detail on that sun and moon is just stunning. In my opinion.
When I was shooting that watch, a moon dial is such a difficult thing to make not cheesy.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
And JLC is the watchmaker's watchmaker, right?
Yep.
And the attention to detail on that was just so phenomenal. Yeah. We'll put some photos up on the screen. Really, really well done. So
it's a beautiful watch.
Stunning.
Yeah.
Very classy. Yeah. How about you, Noah?
And I have the opposite of that. I have this phenomenal IWC Aquatimer, all black, massive, chunky watch.
Sensing a theme here.
Rubberized bezel. And what I really enjoy about this is whenever you click it over, the internal bezel goes, and you can go back the other way, but nothing happens. So it is unidirectional. But yeah, just a very, very cool watch. Big watch. A chronograph. What else? What more could you want? So, Nate, I feel like you're going to have a couple of phenomenal answers for us here. We're coming into release season. What are you looking for? What's your dream release that you want to see come out the next few weeks here?
I'd actually thought that far. But one of the areas I'm hoping to see a little bit more of a return to is the dress watch.
Absolutely.
More of the dress watches, because we've been out of the office for some time, we're working remote, whatever, and a lot of companies are starting to go back.
Yeah.
And people are just looking for that excuse to dress up. And so to be able to get more of those options would be great.
So a new Cellini is what you're looking for. You're putting the credit card down on it. You're ready to go.
I really hope. Let's rock and roll. I really hope that, there's been Cellini has been so slow, not slow in delivering, it sounds wrong, but they clearly not being delivered.
Yeah.
And not being prioritized. And I hope that we see some of those. I feel like these conversations always loop back to Rolex somehow with what's coming out, but I really hope we see some throwback pieces to Rolex Perpetual Calendar or some dress casual pieces that have complication beyond Sky Dweller, beyond that type of thing, that they have that, some sort of strap model that is modern, yet looking back on some of those pieces that are really to the non-hobbyist, really, they're not Rolex, they're not a bracelet sports model that
I mean, the current rose gold moon phase Cellini
Stunning
is
watch.
so slept on. I mean, that's a phenomenal watch.
But imagine that a level up with another comp.
Absolutely. Annual comp would be cool.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Rolex, call us.
Yes.
But anyway, okay, so based off of that, if you go into kind of the Grail watch or the that next dream piece, what are you looking for? What's out there?
Much like your previous guest, I will pick two.
Okay.
And I'll go with the theme of like one would be more mainstream and one would be more independent.
Absolutely.
Mainstream. I'll stick with something that's probably a little bit more hype-ish. Would be a 5990.
Yep.
So stainless steel Nautilus.
Yes.
From Patek.
Wonderful watch.
But the other one that gets me excited, and actually before I do that or say that, is like I would also agree. Like it's interesting, the definition of Grail is that I feel like it's something meant to be chased, and hopefully at some point you hit, and then what happens then?
It's the ultimate until the next ultimate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
But would be actually, and I'm going to butcher it, Ludovic Ballard. And here's the problems with discovering a lot of these brands over the internet is you never hear anybody actually saying the names of the brand.
True.
But he has a watch called the Upside Down. It's a simple time-only piece, and across where you'd see all the 12 time or hour markers, all but one are upside down, and the one that's the correct time is flipped right side up. And all you see is a minute marker going around, and as it flips, you'll see that flip around. And not only at that corner where that hour marker is up, you'll see a dot near it, so it makes it a little bit more easily recognizable which one is right side up. But he does a lot of customizations, and on the back side, like where all those 12 hour markers are, you see like a Maltese cross, which is what helps the movement switch. Because you can imagine you have to flip multiple things at once to move the prior hour and the future hour to flip them around.
Well, that's like an advancement of the Franck Mueller Crazy Hour, because that would obviously go all around.
Correct.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Correct.
That's like the next thing. So very cool. Awesome. Cool.
Thanks.
Very cool.
Well, thank you for joining us, and for all you guys watching at home, thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.